So you started cleaning your Edelbrock carburetor and you know you need to get a rebuild kit for it. So before you make the investment on one, let me show you the differences between the kits that are out there. So first up is the Edelbrock rebuild kit. Now, if you've ever rebuilt these carburetors before, you know that this kit has everything you need for it. But let's take a look at it in depth and see what Edelbrock includes to rebuild one of these carburetors. Now, first tip with this carburetor kit, if you buy one of these and it is not sealed up, return it back to the supplier you got it from and get another one. These are sealed so that you know that nothing has been taken out of there. And unfortunately, a very common thing is for people to buy one of these kits from a retailer, online retailer, locally, whatever, take what they need out of it and return it back to the store for full credit, saying that it's missing parts. So it's a horrible thing, but people aren't very nice to each other a lot of times. So as long as this is factory sealed up and it doesn't have any tape or anything on it, you're good to go. So let's take a look, open this one up and take a look and see what's included. Now, again, as long as it's sealed up, you're good to go. Now, with every Edelbrock carburetor rebuild kit, one of the key components is to make sure that the needle and seats are taken care of. So you'll always have two of those. So there's a smaller packet here with the gaskets for the boosters and for the squirter nozzle. You've got some springs, little clips that you'll need in case you lose those. The little check ball for the nozzle is in there. This is a universal kit, so it'll include some of the things in here, like the little retention clips for the choke housing are in there. All the small parts are in the bag. One little thing that you need to always keep is this nice little ruler. Now, I've got hundreds of these laying around, but unfortunately it's paper, so they don't last very long, but it's a good tool to have just to when you're doing any of the critical measurements on it. And I did a video on those measurements. I gave you the top 6 that are on this carburetor that I check every single time. And that's a good video to go back and look at before you get into the actual rebuild in it. And I've also done a full live stream with doing a rebuild live and answered some questions during it. And that's another really good one to review if you've got any questions on how these are rebuilt. But this is a nice little piece to hang on to, and it comes within the Edelbrock rebuild kit. Choke housing gasket. Unfortunately, I don't understand why they've never done this, but that little weight that goes into the nozzle is usually not included in the small parts package, so you just have to be careful that that's in there. Now you've got a base plate gasket and the top gasket for the air horn assembly, and the main gasket for the air horn assembly to go down to the main body. Within here is a very, very critical piece. Now, we've also gone over this as well in another video on the instructions that come in here. And I know it's instructions. We never look at them, but it's a really, really good thing to hang on to, even to reference after the fact, because it'll help you with any adjustments that you need to make on floats. It's a really, really good thing to hang on to. So we'll reference back to these when we're doing the rebuild, but these are included in the Edelbrock kit. And last but not least are some other little small gaskets. You've got one for the fuel inlet. You've got the accelerator pump, a very nice stiff one. The fuel inlet filter screen, which was very, very good to hang on to. I know some people don't like to run these. They think it's restrictive, but it's really not. And it's the last place to catch garbage before it gets into the carburetor, so it's a good one to hang on to. And that's it. That's what's included in the carburetor rebuild kit from Edelbrock. That's everything you need to do it right. Now, when you buy something that's premium, you're going to pay a premium price. And that's part of the issue with these kits is retail right now, out the door at a local auto parts store, this thing costs with tax about $55. So it's not cheap, but it's a small investment to make to rebuild that carburetor and keep it serviceable and keep it running and operating the way it should be. But is there a cheaper option out there? And the answer to that is yes, but I think we have to be a little careful with it and make sure that it's up to the same standard. So let's take a look at a knockoff one that we got just right off of Amazon and see if it's of the same quality and see what pieces are included in that kit. So let's take a look at that one next. Now, there are a lot of options for these on Amazon, so I just picked out one, and this one was around $20, but the reason why I picked this one is it came with a pair of floats in it, which I thought was interesting, plus a whole new accelerator pump assembly, and again, I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, this one was described as being for the 1406, and that's a little interesting to me because I can see a couple of things right off just looking at the package that tell me that this is really more of a universal kit that they are using for everything. And the Edelbrock kit is universal. That part numbered kit is for all of the Performer Series carburetors. But this one already is a little suspect to me, and we're going to get into that as we open up the package here. Now, this is exactly the way it was sent to me from Amazon. There was no other box or packaging that was in it. And again, I can tell right away that there's some problems here. So let's get this thing open. Let me see if maybe there are some packaging requirements for FBA type sellers through Amazon where you have to package these in a certain way, be sealed up the right way. So I understand why they did this, but it's really makes it a little cumbersome. So let's take and open this up and start taking a look at it. The first thing that I noticed right off the bat were the extra money that I spent to get the nice floats. And they're severely dented. Now, again, it's because of the packaging. It's designed to go on the shelf that way, be stacked up, and unfortunately, these are a little banged up. Now, I can test them, drop them in some mineral spirits, soak them, make sure that there's no leaks, pinhole leaks in there along the seams is usually where they come from. But that's a little disappointing, the packaging right off the bat. These are the old floats out of the kit, so you can tell right away that these have been dented in, and it's not hard to tell that they've been abused. So could you use these? The potential is yes, but you've got to spend some time now to check to make sure that they're in good shape. So that's kind of a negative to that kit already. So let's get some of the other items out of here and take a look at it. The next thing that caught my eye was this accelerator pump assembly. Now, it's pretty cool if they have that. The actual pump is a little softer than the material on the Edelbrock gasket or on the Edelbrock pump. So the reason why that's an issue is this is going down in the plunger. As this is going down in the plunger, you need a fairly tight seal on the wall, and as you push the fuel down, it pushes up through the body, out through the nozzle, in through the squirters to hit the venturi or hit the boosters so they can go down into the carburetor, atomize, and drop fuel. The problem is when these are flimsy, you have an opportunity for these to flip up. Now, it's very rare that I see this because most of the carburetors I deal with are the Edelbrock ones, and this pump never does that. That's a fairly stiff where it needs to be. It's reinforced along the inside. It just doesn't bind up and have issues with it. But I would be a little hesitant with this one. It'd be something you'd have to kind of keep an eye on. It does seal a little bit on the downside of it, but it's a little interesting that I don't think it's got the same amount of sealing as this one does. It's something you'd have to check and verify. So again, more time invested for the $20 you spent on this kit. So it's another thing that I would be concerned with. Now let's take a look at some of the gaskets that are in here. They give you a couple of these, and I can already tell that they are a little bit different type of texture or feeling to it. It feels like the quality's good, but we may have to cut one of these up just to verify how they'll react to fuel. And it's interesting that they gave you two of them, but again, as an offshore knockoff to that Edelbrock part number, sometimes the cost effectiveness of it when you're cheapening things up, for example, with the floats, the packaging being damaged so far, I can see it. These gaskets aren't that much money. I buy these fairly in lots of 100 directly through Edelbrock. But yeah, they don't seem bad. We'll have to take a look a little closer at those a little bit later. Now, another thing I noticed when I was opening up or looking at this kit before I opened it is this has got a different needle valve and seat in it. And it's a little interesting that they include both types in here, but let's pop one of these open and take a look at. I'll get something to lay down here so hopefully you can see this a little bit better. And I'll zoom in on this so we can get a good look at it. But Edelbrock offers two different types of needle and seats. So you've got the barrel or the housing for it. Then you've got two different ones. You got the normal one that comes in a 1406 style carburetor, and it's solid. It's just designed to operate the plunger. Rides along the tab of the float. As the float goes up and down, it adjusts when pressure can come through there, and it releases fuel into the carburetor. However, this one also has the off-road needle and seat style. So the way this one works is you have a small spring that goes in, then you've got a plunger that goes in there. And what this does is it's designed to have a little bit of give to it. And when you're bouncing off-road, you're, beating the vehicle up. Usually it's a truck or four-wheel drive, obviously, but I guess it could be anything. It's designed to keep the float from bouncing all around and take up some of the slack there. That way it's not overfueling the carburetor, which is very common. So it's interesting they include that. It's an interesting little upgrade. The gasket that goes underneath the housing there is not that good. I don't know that I would use that. It's probably okay, but it's just a small little metal type washer, not a compression type gasket like the Edelbrock has in there. So that's a negative for me, unfortunately. Interesting, we got both ways here. I definitely wouldn't use that gasket. As long as the needle and seats work, I'll call those a positive. Now, one thing you have to always be careful of when you look at these knockoff type kits or any type of, whether it's a knockoff carburetor, and there's plenty of them on the market that are brand names of some pretty big retailers that are out there that are in fact knockoffs. They come directly from overseas. They're made and inspected by them before they accept them as a part number deal, but it's questionable. And one thing that's questionable is always the springs, because the tension on the spring is critical. Now, this is the one that goes under the accelerator pump, and it's designed to help push the assembly back up when it's not in use, and that way the pump can operate up and down. The downside is operated by the linkage rod that's on the throttle assembly that pushes it down. This is help and assist to push it back up. If this is weak, and they don't get that very often during time, but I suppose they could, depending how long you were in service on that carburetor. I suppose these could get weak. So I don't have a way of testing the spring tension, but this one feels okay. I would have to get one side by side, and we can take a look at that in a minute and see. So I'll say that this one is potentially okay, but we need to look at it a little closer. So we'll put it over here in that pile. Now let's get everything else, the rest, out of here and see what we come with. We still have our small gasket set here. We got our base plate gasket. You can get this out of here. And that's everything in the package. So choke housing seems okay. That's one thing about any of these kits is the base plate gasket. I don't like these very well. This one's thicker than the one that comes in the Edelbrock, so right away it's already a little bit of a positive for me. I don't like them when they're paper thin. They just don't seal up that well, and it's one of those little areas where you don't need or want a vacuum leak, and it's completely unnecessary. I usually use a Mr. Gasket part number for that. I'll leave a link to it down in the description, but this one seems okay. I would probably use that one and not be too concerned with it. The air horn gasket for the top for the air cleaner seems okay. And again, comes with a little calibration. We'll just have to see that the calibration's the same and it's not off by a lot, but it's good that it's in there. Now let's take a look at the small gasket set that's in here. We'll grab that paper towel again, and we'll see what comes in this kit. Now, right away, I notice it has some things in it that are not normal rebuild service repair parts in the Edelbrock kit, so let's talk about that really quick. These are for the primary side of the carburetor. These are for the boosters. These are for the secondary side, and for whatever reason, they give you an extra one of each. Not bad. I'm okay with that. The gaskets seem okay. Again, I think this is just one where you just be a test of time, but they feel like the similar thickness, so I guess it's nice to have an extra one. That's not a bad deal, so far that looks good. This is kind of interesting. It's a non-wearable part. It's the pin that goes for the float assembly to attach it to the air horn assembly. So that's kind of interesting that they include those in there. Edelbrock doesn't, but again, it's a non-wearable part. I don't know why they would put that in there, but I guess it's all good. Check ball and weight for the nozzle is in that package, which is good. I'm glad they do that. This is interesting. The clips that are in here are not the same type and size of the Edelbrock ones. Now, the Edelbrock ones are much smaller because you've got some small little notches that are on the accelerator pump, the choke from the electric choke up to the linkage rod or the main rod that goes through the carburetor. That's kind of interesting. We'll just have to compare those and see. So one gasket for the nozzle setup, that's fairly common, and one of the gaskets. So far, I'm kind of 50-50 on this. These are a big issue because if they don't work and they pop off, you've got some issues there. And I've installed these incorrectly before where I haven't seated it fully down on there and they'll fly off. They've got a funny little name to them, but these are kind of interesting. We'll just have to test them on an actual linkage rod to make sure they work. This is for the main fuel nozzle that comes into the side, or the main fuel fitting. And again, it's metal, so it doesn't really have any sealing properties to it, and that's a big no-no for me. There's no way on earth that I would use it. So I'm kind of 50-50 on that. I like that it's got a couple extra gaskets in there. I don't know what you would use them for. They only include one there, which is fine, but these clips are suspect. We'll just have to see, but that's an absolute no-go. So I definitely would not use that out of this kit. So we'll put that over there, and the clips we'll have to check, and I guess we'll have to check that spring as well and just see how it all works out. But other than that, that kit's fairly complete. It's got some extra things in there, some things you don't need, but whatever, I guess it's good to have them. Now let's talk about these little clips. I want to show you one of the clips that are on this carburetor that's assembled, and this one's the easiest one to take off here. So let me just pop one off, and we can take a look at that so you can see the differences between these. Now, I'm going to get you a close-up shot of this, but you'll see right away how much different and how much smaller the Edelbrock clip is compared to it. And the problem with having that bigger clip is I don't know that it's got enough area in there to grab a hold of that rod. So let's install it on there and see how it works. Yeah, unfortunately, that is very, very difficult to get on there. And again, the Edelbrock ones are, the one that comes in the Edelbrock kit, are slightly open, and what that does is it gives the ability to start on there so you can guide these on. I usually put them on by hand. This one is so tight on there, it's fighting me, and that's not a good thing with these clips because they tend to go flying on you. So let me open this one up a little bit, or see if I can open it up a little bit, and we'll go from there. Okay, so it's on there, but it is very, very loose, and unfortunately being big and bulky, I don't know if that's an issue, but I can pop that right off on the top side because it's got so much area to grab a hold of. The Edelbrock ones, you have to really kind of pop it from the bottom side to get it, so, and I just lost it. Oh, no, there it is. So, yeah, these clips for me, I'd give them a shot, but it would be one of those things where it'd be in the back of my mind, and I'd have to think about it every time I pop the hood and the air cleaner off just to verify they were still there. So I don't like them, and I don't know that I would use them if I had another option, but I guess I will call it a maybe. Now, before we get too far into this, I want to point out one other thing that I just noticed as I was standing here. Look at this. Now, this is a rebuilt 500 CFM. It's ready to go. It's up for sale. But when I look back at this accelerator pump, I was just trying to determine how I was going to take a look at that. And we'll test that in the other body just to, since it's assembled, it'll be a little bit easier to do it. But there's two things about this that I noticed right off the bat. The Edelbrock one is a plastic piece, and I don't think that's an issue. I've never seen that rod break that holds that assembly together. This one's brass, or appears to be brass, so that's kind of interesting. However, that spring is for more of the 800 series carburetor. It's got a stiffer spring on there, and what that means is, as that is compressing down in the accelerator pump housing, what it does is that spring will take up some tension as it meets the resistance of the fluid going through there. Now, the 600 and the 500, 650 carburetors have a smaller spring. And let me grab one of those so I can show you and compare the two. Now, remember we talked a minute ago about the spring tension? Look at the differences between those two springs. You've got a big, thick, heavy, beefy spring that'll provide more tension, which means it's going to give a bigger shot of fuel in that carburetor. Now, that could be a good thing. It could also be a bad thing. That carburetor is calibrated for a spring that has much less tension, and you can see that that's collapsible fairly easy. On this one, it's very, very stiff. It's very, very difficult to get that to collapse. And I can see if they decided to include both of these assemblies, but including only one option in it is a no-go. I'm definitely glad I put that in the no-go pile over here. I would use this in a 750 or an 800, and I would use it if I had some tuning situations that were required me on a 600 or a 650 to try to give it a little bit more fuel with a nozzle change and maybe a pump rod change, or the hole change, and then maybe throwing in the stiffer spring. But right off the bat on a 500, 600, 750 carburetor, that's a no-go. Now I'm going to do just a really, really simple take a look at this accelerator pump. Here's the one that was out of the carburetor. We talked about the spring. We talked about the plunger itself. And so let me see how it feels going in there and see if I can determine. Yeah, it starts about right there where you can tell where it starts to contact the sides. And that is at the point where it starts to seal up to it and begins to push fuel. Now that's at the very bottom of it. Kind of see how it sticks out of there. We'll kind of go from there. Now let's take and compare it if we can, just by feel. And I guess it's pretty close. I would have to do some measurement, but that definitely sticks out way farther. The issue with that is when that sticks out further out the top, the problem is you change the geometry of how much that plunger goes up and down, and that may mean you'll have to bend the linkage rod to get that to operate correctly, so it will go down far enough within the barrel here of the accelerator pump. So that assembly for me, given that it's got the wrong spring on it, I don't mind that it's brass, but being that it's too tall and that questionable material on there, I don't know that I would use these. I think I would pitch it and opt for something else. Go back to the Edelbrock one. Now let's compare the gasket, the air horn gasket that came out of the offshore knockoff kit to the one that comes in the Edelbrock kit. And really all I'm doing is, one, comparing the thickness of it. And I like the thickness of this one, the offshore one, the knockoff one. It's not bad. So really the knockoff one's on the top side. Let's see on the back side if there's anything that's punched out of the Edelbrock one that's not on that one. And it appears that all the holes are there, so that's not bad. I would give the air horn gasket a pass. I would probably use those. Here's something fun. The ruler that comes within the Chinese knockoff kit is a little off. Your measurements for this thing are going to be off by quite a bit, so I get it. You know, having it in there is cool, but if it's not accurate, then what's the point really? So junk. Now let's pop back to the Edelbrock bag here that's got the gaskets, small gaskets in it, and we'll notice something that's missing out of the knockoff kit, and that is these little retention springs for the metering rods to attach to the piston, and that's a big deal. I mean, those don't wear out, but you can lose them fairly easily, and having another set of these is always a good idea. So, yeah, it's missing out of the knockoff kit, so this is a failure. So what did we learn from this? I think really what it boils down to is Edelbrock has produced this carburetor for a very, very long time. They have a really good understanding of really what the serviceable parts and the serviceable pieces of it and the consumables within the carburetor need to be, and included those in the kit. Now, is the $50 price acceptable? To me, it's yes, because you're looking to rebuild it and put it back on an engine, get it running, and forget about it, and move on to whatever else you need to work on. So for me, I would probably continue to spend my money on this kit. Now, there is just too many little things within this one that make this unusable, being that the packaging stinks and these nice brass floats, apparently, that I wanted in the kit or thought would be cool were dented. I think that's going to be common practice in that type of packaging. The accelerator pump, I don't think I would use it. The return spring for the accelerator pump, it's a kind of a wash. It's a maybe. Absolutely not on these types of, it's not even really a gasket. It's more of like a washer. It would probably seal okay, but with fuel today and ethanol and everything else that we kind of fight, I don't know that I'd be willing to take the chance in these. So I'm going to guess it's probably not anything that I would use, especially on the fuel inlet side. Maybe on the needle and seats, it'd be okay. The clips that come on here for the carburetor, they give you quite a few extra ones, by the way, too, but I guess maybe I'm used to the other ones, and maybe it would be something to get used to. Now, again, that kit was about $20 from Amazon. Would I buy another one? The answer to that's absolutely not. I get it. It's half the price or less than half the price of the Edelbrock kit. There's just too many things in there that just make me uncomfortable with it, and things that you're not going to be able to use. You're going to have to go out and find these things, whether directly from Edelbrock or try to buy an assembly. I think the accelerator pump's available as an assembly. I don't know that you can get the springs separately, but the clips, all that stuff, it's just, I'm not comfortable enough with it. I would absolutely give that an absolute no-go. I wouldn't use it. So I hope that gave you a little bit of insight on these things. Again, rebuilding carburetors is not complicated. I've done a ton of videos on this carburetor. I know it very well. I know how it works. I understand that they're not complicated, but when you introduce more problems that you're trying to fix when you're doing something, you just tend to end up chasing them. And that to me is a no-go. When I fix something, I want it done right and gotten rid of, and that way I can move on to other things. And in this instance, when you're rebuilding something, especially when you're dealing with fuel and the dangerous situation that you could put yourself into, I don't think I could put my hands in something that was $20 off Amazon that had a couple of other little flashy things in it and maybe another gasket or two, and maybe it'd be okay. I don't think I could do it. So anyway, that's that from this one. Hope that gave you a little bit of insight. If you have any questions about the rebuild kit, especially the Edelbrock one, please don't hesitate to leave them down below. If you got something out of the video, please give me a thumbs up. YouTube likes that a lot. And I guess what we will do is catch you guys on the next one. We'll see you.